It's good to be with you this afternoon. A momentous day in a way, probably the final witness, the final day of testimony at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, a commission which I think you could argue has shaped our politics over the last 3 years. The witness, of course, was President Ramaphosa. We're joined now by the political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi, as well as the chair of Corruption Watch, the executive director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you, and I really do appreciate the time. Thank you. David, if I may just start with you, there's a big question around whether we can trust President Ramaphosa's commitment to fight corruption. It's a stated commitment by him that he is against corruption. He stayed in the Zuma administration. He says he wanted to resist from within. At the same time, we have what happened after the Zuma administration, where he perhaps has tried to build institutions to reform the state. Do you believe him when he says he is fighting corruption?
Yes, I do, actually. I do. I mean, I think that the record of his administration, obviously post his accession to power, has not been a bad one. I mean, particularly in his capacity as head of state. In his capacity as head of the ANC, he's had a rather more difficult time and generated a lot of impatience, and I include myself amongst those impatient, to resolve the matters within the ANC. But it's not easy. But I found his testimony this afternoon absolutely fascinating. That little saying that he used, the strongest people are not those who show strength in front of us, but those who win battles we know nothing about. And when he outlined, the various battles that were fought, I found that quite persuasive, because really what are the alternatives for somebody in his position? Should he have stood up immediately he saw things were not right in the state of the country, and his allies with him, and there would have been one of two consequences. One, the government would have fallen, but much more likely Ramaphosa and his allies would have been driven out of the party. And what would have happened then? Who would we have landed up with as president then? Maybe Ace Magashule. And so these are very difficult calls to make about whether you stay on and fight inside and live to fight another day, or whether you take a stand that will have you driven out of the party. And they are very difficult, very, very difficult calls to make. And I have to say, in 2021, I think he made the right call.
Professor Matebesi, do you agree? I mean, in a way, this comment by him yesterday and then the questions he was asked about it today, I think are going to define the next few months of our political discourse.
Stephen and the viewers, good afternoon. I think we come from a position where we are very comfortable in commenting on some of these issues that happens, but it is very difficult. I often refer to people working in a workplace where you've got almost like an authoritarian boss. It's very difficult for those staff members to air their views and all that. And I think we need to put that into context. During the time of the former President Jacob Zuma, it was very difficult. We saw how many cabinet reshuffles didn't we have. So I understand where the president is coming from, and to a certain extent I do agree with David on that one. But the question is, are we currently also having public servants, ministers who've got issues and who can identify the weaknesses of the current president, who are keeping mum because they want to advance their own interest? And what stood out for me very interestingly was that the president stated today that he is going to use the report of the Zondo Commission as a guide to take action against certain people like Arthur Fraser and David Mahlobo. That is for me very shocking. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, he got the very same guideline, I'm using his own words, from the SIU. And up until today, South Africans have not yet been taken into confidence. about the content of the SIU report. So yes, I've stated it on numerous occasions. I've got great respect for President Cyril Ramaphosa. He is the best that we have, because we don't know if he have left, and he could have left. Because remember, he's made his money. He could have decided to resign from the African National Congress. But fact of the matter is, there are moments in time where there's also doubts. Yes, he should balance his act, trying to protect his own interest, but at the end of the day, South Africans, and South Africans today, not tomorrow, also expect credible leadership, formidable leadership, leadership that advance the interests of South Africans, irrespective of the internal battles within the African National Congress.
David Lewis, I understand the argument that at the time one had to move slowly, and I understand the argument as well. I mean, I don't necessarily by that say I agree with it, but I understand the argument that the President has had to move slowly. But David, is there any conceivable reason that Arthur Fraser should still be in government with what we know about him?
No, there isn't any conceivable reason, and the same goes for David Mahlobo. And I didn't agree with the way in which I think he passed the buck to the Commission to make up his mind for him, or to make his decision for him. I mean, the appointment of cabinet ministers and deputy cabinet ministers and people in the position of Arthur Fraser is entirely within the remit of the president, and he had absolutely no reason to support them. Mahlobo was a lousy minister, all other things aside, but he was also very possibly a corrupt minister. And I really didn't agree with the way in which that particular buck was passed. But I repeat, on the bigger question of whether he should have hung in there or not, I think on balance and with hindsight, I'm prepared to say that I'm rather pleased that he hung in there. I think he was much too kind to his colleagues. I mean, when he presented his strategic choices, as he termed them, as the strategic choices that all cabinet ministers and ANC leaders had to make, I think he was being much too kind to them. Frankly, I think at very best they were fence sitters. At worst, they were, happy to go along with Zuma for the crumbs that fell off the table. So I don't think that they were making big strategic choices. All that they were wanting to see is who won the battle. And, some of them were lucky enough to, survive with the winner of the battle, not having done very much to advance the battle that the winner and some other cabinet ministers fought. But in answer to your question about Fraser, no, I don't think he should be there, and nor do I think Mahlobo should be there.
Well, more on this in a moment. There are so many more conversations to continue with around the State Security Agency. David Lewis from Corruption Watch, and also, of course, Professor Sethulego Matebesi. Back with that conversation in a moment. Stay with us. Strong comments today from the President while testifying under oath at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, probably as their last witness. Professor Sethulego Matebesi, the political analyst, David Lewis, the Executive Director of Corruption Watch, both with me now. Professor Matebesi, there's a lot more to say about the State Security Agency. The President has said time and time and time again, he said it in his closing statement just 20 minutes ago, he said that we need to reform institutions. It's all about building institutions. It would seem to me the State Security Agency is an institution. I have to tell you, I'll scratch my head, I'll look through a magnifying glass. I don't see the reform.
Not at all, Stephen. We know perhaps the President will refer to a reform as the decision that he have recently taken by at least, taking over the state security intelligence to the presidency. But fact of the matter is, I think the President now had enough time to deal with some of the challenges that South Africa has been confronted with. And the question is, when is he going to make a reform? I mean, his 5-year term is coming to an end, and I know he has an aspiration to get a second term from the African National Congress. And for me, each time he delays And as he also have correctly stated yesterday, I mean, if you look at an increase in irregular spending, for me, a 10 rand spent irregularly, that is corruption. And I think we've started to normalize that, and that for me is very unacceptable, that you've got a president who has got all the support to do the necessary changes, but yet he's not doing that. We've seen the challenge against some of the so-called renewal within the African National Congress, the fight against corruption, which one should actually commend the president for that. And I would also want to say we should also commend a sitting president who exposes himself like that, who agrees to go to a commission. But fact of the matter is, there should not be a public relations exercise. The president should act, and he should act today. He's got all the necessary resources to do that, and I haven't also seen any changes. Yes, we have seen some muted attempts at taking the fight against corruption to another level, but yet I strongly believe that that is too little.
David Lewis, as I understand the procedure now, the Commission issues a final report. In other words, it issues findings. The President then presumably will accept or dispute the findings. There are supposed to be prosecutions that flow from this. Now, the National Prosecuting Authority does its own investigations. The evidence heard at the Zondo Commission can't be admitted in court. But it is entirely possible that someone will go to court to challenge the findings of this Commission. Could that stop actual prosecutions in some way? I can see all sorts of legal arguments going on for another 20 years.
You have to ask a lawyer, an administrative and constitutional lawyer that. But I don't see why it should stop prosecutions. They're entirely different decisions made by different bodies acting on the same information but with different standards of proof. So I can't see why it would stop decisions. Also, we were one of the first organizations that took a commission of inquiry on review and actually won the review and set aside the findings of the commission. And that was the Seriti Commission. But in that instance, we reviewed the entire commission, partly on the basis on which Judge Seriti conducted the inquiry or didn't conduct the inquiry, as the case may be. In this instance, I think there will be no disputing the manner in which Judge Zondo conducted the inquiry. There may be particular people who feel particularly aggrieved by particular findings, and they may take those on review. But I think there will be plenty of decisions and recommendations of the Commission that stand unreviewed. And so, I think the release of the recommendations will be a momentous occasion, and there will be little to stop them being implemented. And there will be, I think, but I may be wrong about this, I think there will be nothing to stop the National Prosecuting Authority acting on the basis of its investigations. It may not be able to, in some instances, draw on evidence presented to the Commission, but it, in any event, has to prove all those allegations again. There's no way that it can simply take findings of the Commission and put them before a court. It has to prove them again, even if they're not reviewed. And so I don't think that this will disrupt any prosecution that arises out of this.
Professor Matebesi, we don't have the final report yet, but for the last 3 years or so, we've watched evidence given under oath by politicians. People ask difficult questions, people giving evidence against politicians, even without the final report. Do you think the Zondo Commission has changed our country, changed our politics?
No, most definitely. We've already seen some of the, whether it's indirect consequences of the Zondo Commission. We had a former the finance minister, former home affairs minister, who were fired on the basis of some of the evidence that was led at the Zondo Commission, I definitely foresee a situation where there will be action taken on the basis of the findings of the Zondo Commission. But also for ordinary South Africans, we understand, and for a long time we've known that there has been corruption and a lot of other, issues around governance within the African National Congress and in our public service. But for the very first time, I also think that a bigger scheme of issues, the Zondo Commission have given us a little window to be able to tap in, and sometimes very shocking revelations of the things that our public servants, our taxpayers' money is being used. So for me, in short, I definitely see there will be consequences. But I'm a little bit concerned, and I just don't know whether the Zondo will ask for another, extension of the commission, because I think we also get to a situation where we're getting, fatigue with this commission. But at the end of the day, I strongly believe that there's a lot of positives that will come out of the Zondo Commission.
Professor Sethulego Matebesi, I appreciate the time. David Lewis, thank you very much indeed, Executive Director of Corruption Watch. In a moment, more on this and other news in Pulse.